Why don't we begin by praying? So God, we thank you so much for today. God, what an opportunity this is to be here today, to learn from one another, to be together in your presence. And Holy Spirit, I just ask that you would open our hearts, that you would open our minds, you would open our eyes, Lord, to see you, to hear from you, God. And we just pray that this time together would be very worthwhile, that we would learn something, God, that maybe we hadn't heard before, or just hearing something in a new way, and that you just inspire us in this hour, God. So we give this time to you in Jesus' name. Amen. So for those of you that were here in the first session, Carolyn did sort of briefly introduce me. My name is Andy Dehoog. I'm the children's pastor here at Christian Life Assembly. I've been here for just over 5 years now. I started doing kids ministry kind of semi by accident. There's a long story behind that, but I started off in Powell River, which is where Megan is from. So this is really kind of interesting because Megan was one of my volunteers there at Powell River, and I was there for 2 years. Then I've been here for just over 5. So been in kids ministry full-time as a children's pastor with that title, full-time, whatever, for just over 7 years. I also have been married to my wonderful wife for over 10 years now, and we have 4 kids. So we live in the world of little kids. That's what we do. And, I don't want to stand here today pretending that I have all the answers for you, because I don't. I am learning. Somebody who's been doing something less than 10 years, to me, I think I'm still new. Like, I'm still figuring this out, and so I don't want you to think that, oh, this guy's got all the answers and we're just going to do what he does, because that's not the case. I'm here to learn too. So anyways, not perfect. Just want you to know that. Now, some of you introduced yourselves when Carolyn was here, but who here, I just want to hear from you, who here, because we're talking about volunteer management, who here would actually admit that you manage volunteers, that you have people that, just raise your hand, you have people that you manage, that you schedule, that report to you? Okay, most people, you work with people. It's good, okay, you're in the right place then. The second thing I want to find out from you is, what is your top 5? When it comes to working with volunteers, managing volunteers, what are your top 5 concerns, issues, challenges, things that you face? Just somebody just shout something out. Just what are the things that are on your mind that you want help with, you want to figure out, that you struggle with? Just something. Anybody?
Finding them.
Sorry?
Finding them.
Okay. Recruiting. Okay, well that's a good chunk of my talk is about recruiting. What else?
Retention and conflict resolution.
Conflict resolution and you said retention.
Yeah.
Okay, keeping them around. Yeah.
For me, it was, I'm in a new position where the whole thing was run by volunteers, and now I'm a paid person, so now all the volunteers, they don't have to be there.
Because you're there. So what do we need to be paid for?
Excellent!
That's what everybody's getting paid for, so I don't need to be here.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. What else?
Transition from having a warm body to having somebody that's called into that position.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting the right people in the right places. Yeah.
Giving feedback without scaring them off.
Giving feedback,
Yeah.
like as in you as the leader giving feedback to them.
The volunteers, right? Like, I want to train them and rate them to be even better than they are and really great, but
Yeah.
they're volunteers, so you kind of got to work a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Good. Anybody else?
But they know the importance of preparation.
Some of that comes back to commitment level, right? The more committed they are, the more prepared they're going to be. Possibly. Not for everybody, but that's part of it. Yeah.
Building a team, that it's, we're not just in positions, but we're in relationship and we're part of a team.
Helping them see their place on that team and how the team can work together.
Because I've read people are more committed to a person than they are to a program, that they would, that we, none of it, that we draw from each other's strengths and be able to maximize each other.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. Does anybody ever get discouraged about working with volunteers, trying to manage volunteers, trying to recruit volunteers? Anybody ever feel discouraged about that? Oh, come on. Come on. I want to begin by describing to you the ultimate volunteer. And I hope you'll get a kick out of this. I had fun writing it. But what I want to demonstrate to you is, in sort of a super elevated, fantastical kind of way, I want to describe to you the volunteer process that we have in place here at CLA, what we do with volunteers, how we recruit, how we train, encourage, appreciate, all of those things, okay? So, this is about Susan. Susan was sitting in church one day enjoying her passive Christian life, ensuring that her same seat was warmed at least 2 or 3 out of every 4 Sundays, when suddenly she was held captive by a PowerPoint slide on the screen. The children's ministry needed help, but not just any help. They needed her help. The conviction of the Holy Spirit was so heavy upon Susan in that moment that she could not contain it any longer. As the offering bags continued to make their way through the congregation, Susan stood and shouted, "Here I am, Lord, send me!" Then she ran out of the room, dropping a very large donation designated to children's ministry in the offering bag on her way out, and sprinted down the hall to the children's ministry office, pushing innocent bystanders out of the way as she went with the fervor and intensity of a running back on his way to the end zone. Upon reaching the children's pastor's office, Susan knelt at his feet, bowing her head, and said, "O great shepherd of the blessed little children, to whom the kingdom of heaven belongs, I am here as a servant of the Almighty to be placed in an area of ministry that will be of most benefit to this great ministry under your excellent and incomparable leadership. My life is of no consequence, so I beseech thee to place me where thee see fit." To which the children's pastor said, "Great, let's start with an application form and criminal record check." In a few short minutes, Susan had completed all of the applicable paperwork and had already signed up for the next children's ministry training session coming up that Saturday morning. Susan arrived to the training session 30 minutes early, bringing chocolate croissants and Starbucks coffee for the whole group. Throughout the session, Susan feverishly took notes and asked clarifying questions to reinforce each main thought. At the conclusion, Susan led the group in a standing ovation for the presenter and led the group in an hour of intercessory prayer for the children's ministry. The next day was Sunday, Susan's first day on the job. Still riding the wave of inspiration from the training session the day before, Susan arrived at the church 2 hours before the service to pray and prepare, which included a few Martha Stewart-esque decorations for the classroom she had been assigned to. As the children began to arrive, it was a rainy Sunday morning, and Susan met each family in the parking lot with an umbrella and greeted each child by name, looking them in the eyes and giving each one a personalized gift. For you see, Susan had studied the class list the night before, learning each of the names. Throughout the class time, Susan assisted each child with every activity, showering everyone with positive words, encouragement, words of knowledge, prophecy, psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. She made melody in her heart to the Lord, giving thanks at every opportunity for the grace bestowed upon her and for the privilege of serving these wonderful little angels, also known as the 2-year-olds. At the end of the class, Susan said goodbye to each child and praised each one in front of their parents and thanked the parents for allowing her the opportunity to care for and to minister to the children. After all the children had gone, the teacher informed Susan that she would be away next Sunday and asked if Susan would like to teach the class in her place. Susan enthusiastically and instantly agreed. And she wondered out loud, how much better could this get? After staying behind another hour to ensure that the classroom was completely tidied, vacuumed, and sanitized, Susan stopped by the children's ministry office to inform the staff of the change in the teaching schedule. She then promptly went home, fasting over lunch, and instead praying and preparing her lesson for next Sunday. 2,080 Sundays later, that's 40 years, Susan reluctantly retired from her post as teacher of the 2-year-olds and was honored with an appreciation banquet to which the entire church congregation, staff, pastors, mayor, city council, members of parliament, and the prime minister himself attended. Throughout the course of the evening, Susan was accoladed by former students and their parents, thanking her for her years of service and directing them away from the wide path which only leads to destruction. Susan humbly received this verbal praise, but refused to accept any monetary or material gifts, insisting that her treasures are in heaven. Finally, Susan quietly returned home, only wishing that she could have done more. So that's Susan, the ultimate volunteer. Anybody got anybody like that? No? Yeah? Close?
He's passed on, but yeah.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing about that story, is that there are a few that exist that are like that. But I would say the vast majority are not. Right? Volunteer management. You know, that word management carries with it some negative connotation for those who consider themselves to be leaders. We say, oh, I'm not a manager. I'm a leader. I don't manage, I lead. And, you know, it's been said that managers do things right, but leaders do the right things. So what does that mean? Does that mean that leaders do things wrong and managers do the wrong things? You know what I think the difference between a manager and a leader is? Not much. Not much. Because I think that good managers, people who manage other people well, they're leaders. They have influence on those people's lives. They impact and they influence the people that they manage to make decisions about their behavior. They are leaders. And good leaders, let's not kid ourselves, good leaders are managers. People who are in leadership have to do management. It's the way it works. When I meet somebody unchurched, and the way this usually goes down for me is I'm often at a kid's birthday party, either one of my own kids or another family has invited us to a birthday party, and this is where I meet all of these other dads, because the dads all kind of stand in the corner and watch it all happen, you know, and so I kind of go over there and stand with the dads, and we watch it all happen, and we start to talk, and often I meet these other dads who are unsaved, unchurched guys, and usually one of the first questions we ask each other is, anybody want to take a guess? So what do you do? Yeah, as if our identity is wrapped up in our jobs, you know? Oh, my name's Andy, what do you do? And when I tell these guys, oh, I'm a children's pastor, you know, the look on their face is usually confusion, or it's, oh, cool. But you can tell it's like, oh, cool, I have no idea what you're talking about. Kind of, oh, cool. You know, the pastor, is that kind of like a priest? But children, what in the world is that? Like, I just don't get it, right? So I start to describe to them what it is I do. And yes, of course I say, well, I provide leadership and I do all this. But when I start to describe the nitty-gritty things of what I do on a regular basis, it starts to sound like management, right? And I know this because this is what these guys have told me. They said, oh, so it's kind of like a manager, that you oversee people and you run stuff. Yeah, it's kind of like management. So don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of considering yourself to be a manager of people. Don't think of yourself as just a leader, but you're also a manager. So we're talking about volunteer management. And like I said, I want to take you through this volunteer process, which I described with the Susan story. It's not a totally serious story, but it did include some of the elements of the process. And out of the process, I want to draw some principles and hopefully some practical ideas that you might want to try in your context. Put it this way. I don't have a whole stack of worksheets like Carolyn had or whatever. I had a few slides, but if you get one thing out of my talk today, if you get one practical idea that you can put into practice, or one inspirational thought, or one confirmation, maybe something I'll say will just confirm something for you, then I think we've accomplished something good today. So first of all, I think it should go without saying that volunteers are important. Would you agree with that? Volunteers are important. Without volunteers, we do not have a quality ministry. My job exists to support volunteers. And by the way, we use the word volunteer, or we try to, somewhat interchangeably with team member. You ever heard that before? Don't call them volunteers, call them team members. And so we try to do that as much as we can, because we want to encourage a culture of teamwork and inclusiveness. I am not more important to the work of the kingdom as a paid pastor than Jennifer, who teaches 3-year-olds month on, month off at the 11 o'clock service. She is just as important. She is one of the team. She's not just a volunteer, and I'm the leader. We're in the team together. Okay? We are all in the same team, and there cannot exist in our ministries a sense of competitiveness, or an us versus them mentality. Those kinds of attitudes are evil. They are not the will of God, and they must be eliminated. In John chapter 17, Jesus prays that we as believers would live in unity. In unity, we're all on the same team. Secondly, it's unbiblical, and it is really annoying, that alarm. It is unbiblical and ungodly to think that you should or that you can do your ministry alone. Why are we called to ministry? Why are we called to ministry? Why do we even have these positions of leadership in the church? Anybody want to throw an idea out? Ephesians 4. Okay, Ephesians 4 tells us that we are called, the church leaders are called, and we're gifted as apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers to equip. That's right, equip God's people. Our volunteers, our team members are God's people. God has called and gifted you to lead. He has gifted you to equip. And He has gifted you, yes, to manage the team members that He has given you. And by the way, be thankful for the people that you do have. I think that was kind of the point of Carolyn's talk this morning, where she was talking about your existing. We're going to talk a whole bunch about recruiting in a few minutes here, how to get those people on your team. But Carolyn talked a lot about, your existing people. Be thankful for the people that you do have. Don't always be so focused on the people that you don't have. Okay, look at Exodus 33. You don't have to look at it right now. But this is a chapter of the Bible that I've been meditating on for probably a month now. And it's the conversation between Moses and God. Do you know what I'm talking about? And they're at the mountain there, and they're talking about the next part of their journey. And I love how the chapter starts, because God says to Moses, I love in the New Living. The Lord says to Moses, get going. Get going. You and the people you brought up from the land of Egypt. But those 2 words, get going. God's saying, you got something to do. So get on with it. Right? So there's this whole conversation that happens. And the way I apply that into our case is that we got something to do, right? We got a ministry to do. We got to get going. But then if you look at verse 12, one day Moses said to the Lord, you have been telling me, take these people up to the promised land, but you haven't told me whom you will send with me. You haven't told me whom you will send with me. It's like Moses is going, okay, yeah, we want to get going, but who's the team? Who's my assistant? Who are you sending with me? And it's a legitimate question, right? I think we ask that question on a weekly basis around here sometimes. Who's going to teach that kindergarten class anyways? And who's gonna take the grade 5 girls? Well, whom are you going to send, Lord? It's a legitimate question. And when you look at verse 14, the Lord replied, I will personally go with you. I will personally go with you. See, it doesn't matter so much who you don't have as much as who you do have. And who you have is God. If God is on your side, who can be against you? Now, of course, the reality is that you need people, right? You got to have people, because in kids ministry, we set up a structure, right? In our case, we have a Sunday school on Sundays, and so we have a structure in place, and you have to have those gaps filled. You got to function. There's an expectation that you're going to be functioning on Sunday. So, yes, God is on our side, but we also need people to fill those spots, right? Right? Okay, so how do we get people? How do you recruit? So this is kind of like the first part of the process that I mentioned earlier. This is where it all starts, recruiting. I'm going to be honest with you. I hate recruiting in a and Esther's going to join me later for the Q&A. She's one of my staff, one of my team members, and she is probably one of the best recruiters I know, and that's good because I'm not one of the best recruiters that I know. I hate recruiting. Like that word just makes me think military or something, and I would never make it. I would never make it as a telemarketer. You know, the rejection of all those people just hanging up on me would just be way too much for me. Like I'd just push me off the edge. Have you ever tried to do that? Have you ever tried to cold call for volunteers? Does anybody just raise your hand? Have you ever done that? Yeah. I did it in Pell River, and I just don't quit. I was like, this is ridiculous. I did it when I came here, too. I was given a list of people that I was to call. Now, these people were people who had volunteered here in the past. Okay, so this wasn't even true cold calling. This was actually a warm market, in a sense, because they had been involved at some point. Now, they hadn't been for a while, but I had this list. We had some gaps to fill in some upcoming Sundays, so I was given this list, and I started calling these people, and what a horrible experience that was. It was brutal. Like hi, this is Pastor Andy from the church. Pastor who? Like, you know, and then I had to explain who I was every time. And it didn't work. Nobody signed up. Nobody wanted to help out. It was ridiculous. So fortunately, I do have a strong recruiter on my team. Anybody ever read Marcus Buckingham? Anything by Marcus? He's a leadership guy, and he says that we need to capitalize on our strengths and manage around your weaknesses. Capitalize on your strengths, manage around your weaknesses. So if you're not a strong recruiter, if that's not your thing, that's fine. That's okay. You got to know what your strength is. You got to know what you're good at. And then, if you can find somebody who is a good recruiter, if you can get somebody who is a good recruiter, maybe there's somebody currently in your ministry, or maybe they're not currently in your ministry, but if you can get one good recruiter on your side that you can sell that vision to, that you can inspire, then that's a win for you because you're able to do what you're best at and that person can do what they're best at. So what I'm just trying to say is that to be a leader in kids ministry, you don't necessarily need to be that strong recruiter, salesperson type. It helps, and if that's your gifting, then great, use it. But you don't have to put yourself into a box, okay? All right, when it comes to recruiting, what works and what doesn't work? That's a question for you. What works and what doesn't work? Anybody got a story? Any ideas? Something that's worked really good for you, or maybe something that's not worked good for you at all? Yeah.
Well, I find notes in the bulletin not particularly effective. When we did for the full day camp that Carolyn mentioned last session, I had that running in there for a number of weeks, but put it and with no bites, and I'm calling people and trying to do it on my own. But we had video footage of the previous camp, and we got it up on the big screen, and we showed it actually happening, and the people in the congregation saw the kids worshiping. They saw volunteers working with the kids, doing things that the kids would enjoy, that they'd sign up to do. And on this registration table at the back, mostly for children to register, and there were all these people. I've been trying to get a dance. Somebody drew hip-hop dance with a bunch of kids. Thought that'll get them coming in, and could not find anyone to dance. And all of a sudden, hi, Lisa, I dance. I've had 17 years. Like they're trying to sell themselves.
Because they saw the video?
I have 17 years experience, and I'm available, and if I can help. And I thought, give me a chair, let me sit down. I'm going to pass out in a minute. But that was really effective. I think just in casting a vision, like that they actually saw it in front of them, and they thought, I could do this. Maybe it demystified it. I don't know. Maybe God just came down.
Sometimes it's as simple as that, right? Sometimes a video over a piece of paper can be more effective, right? What else? Something that worked or something that didn't? Yeah.
I prayed, and I asked people to pray. So I asked them, ask the Lord of the harvest to call people. And ask everybody to pray. The pastoral team, the elders, the board, the parents. And it's most often people who are actually praying that are called, which is really helpful.
Because if they're willing to pray, there's obviously something there that's tugging at their heart, and they feel some sort of calling on some level. If they're at least going to pray, then chances are maybe at some point they will actually physically get in there and be a part of the team too.
And it's biblical too, because we're told, ask the Lord of the harvest.
Exactly.
So it's a promise.
How about something that didn't work for you? Something you tried? We talked about cold calling.
Announcements from the front. Pass the clipboard.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it becomes, is passing the clipboard, not actually writing any names down. Anybody?
I think when you don't have a clear vision, it's really hard for people to capture it. And I know that in the very initial beginning stages of when we're starting up or rekindling our kids' ministry, I had no clue. I was phoned and said, hey, we have a job, blah, 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 the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, sure. And within 3 weeks, we started kids ministry. I had no idea. And finally, I said, I need to have a little bit of time to sit down and come up with, we need to have a vision, we need to have a plan. And until I had that plan, I had the volunteers. And it's when I got a plan, when God finally gave me a vision for what he wanted, that's when we got volunteers.
Yeah, there's got to be a vision in mind. Otherwise, it's just a random, come help me out because, just because. People don't want to volunteer for that. Any particular strategies that worked real well or didn't work real well? Okay. I think it's not so much that some strategies work and some don't. I think it's more that some strategies are simply more effective than others, and some are more effective within certain groups or types of people. And some strategies are simply more effective at different times of the year even, or with particular events or something. I don't think there's any one strategy that doesn't work and any one strategy that does work. It's very diverse. You know, for example, in the example of Susan, she was recruited by a PowerPoint slide. Right? Remember that in the story? It was offering time, there's PowerPoints. She saw it, she responded to a PowerPoint slide. Generally, in my experience, people are not recruited by a PowerPoint slide. Mostly, people are recruited by people. Right? People are recruited by people. There was a statistic that I read in Children's Ministry magazine. It's from the U.S. Department of Labor, and it says that 44.6%, so that's almost half of volunteers in the U.S., this is not necessarily church volunteers, but almost half of the volunteers in the U.S. became involved with an organization after being personally asked by someone in the organization. Note that it's not necessarily the leader of the organization, but by someone in the organization being personally asked. Almost half those people, that's how they got recruited. Now, however, media, such as a PowerPoint slide, the church bulletin, website, some of the things that some of you have mentioned already, they can and they do have a place in recruiting. We have had people respond to PowerPoint slides. It can work, but it's probably not as effective as recruiting through personal contact. And when I say effective, I'm also talking about the quality that that person would provide and the relationship and commitment level of that person to your ministry. Generally, the people who would respond to a PowerPoint slide or an ad in the bulletin or something are the people who come on a whim. They feel in that moment that, oh, I should do that because that would be a good thing to do. But generally, their level of commitment and their longevity won't be there. However, if you have somebody who has some sort of personal relationship with you or with someone else in your ministry, that person is more likely to provide better quality and to stay committed for a longer period of time. In other words, it's better to get one friend working with you than 10 people who respond to a PowerPoint, because that one friend is probably going to do a great job and they're going to stick out, they're going to stick with you. Right? People who respond to something else may or may not work out for you. So, I love what you just said about prayer, because that was actually sort of the first step that I had in mind when it comes to recruiting. The first step is prayer. The first step in anything we should do should be prayer. Don't overlook this part. We are not simply trying to get people to fill gaps and to make our child-to-worker ratios look good, although some weeks it probably feels that way. But no, we are inviting people to fulfill a calling on their lives. We are gathering people to partner with us and with families to let children come to Jesus. That's why we have kids ministries in churches, is to bring children to Jesus. There is a harvest of children and families to be gathered in Jesus. As you said, instructed us to pray for workers. It's Matthew 9. He didn't say panic. He didn't say stress out. He didn't say work harder, although maybe there's some value in some of those things. But the first thing he said to do was to pray. And in John 15, Jesus said, apart from me, you can do nothing. So without God at work in us, without prayer, we do not have an effective ministry. The harvest is too great for us to try and do it on our own. In Langley, and I want you to think of your own community, but in Langley, and this is a number from a few years ago, there were 10,000 children registered in the public school system. That's just the elementary school system. That's not including private schools, homeschoolers, preschoolers, anything younger than preschool, up to, I guess it's grade 7 is Langley School District. That's from a few years ago, so I think it's probably more than that, 10,000. As a church, Christian Life Assembly in Langley, we are reaching currently less than 0.05% of that number. And we're a relatively big church. Okay? What I'm saying is it's way too big a job to try and do without the power of the Holy Spirit working in you and drawing these workers to you in your ministry. So, first, pray, then talk and plan and do your PowerPoint slide or whatever you're doing. But first, pray. Another strategy is to use, but don't rely on the influence of your senior leadership, like your senior pastor. If children's ministry has a high value with your senior pastor, then get him to partner with you to recruit from the pulpit. If your senior pastor does not highly value children's ministry, then God help you. No, I'm just kidding. Then it's up to you to show him the value of what you do. You've got to do some show and tell with him. Your job is to support the vision of the church. You are not to become some island ministry that's doing your own thing. You are a part of your church, supporting the vision of your church as communicated by your senior pastor. So if he doesn't know what's going on, show him, tell him, show him pictures, show him a video, write a report, something. Do something. Get him praying. That's an awesome thing. That's a great thing. Get him praying. Don't always be, oh man, we're so desperate, we need people. No, just ask people to pray and just show what's already happening. Keep your senior leadership in the loop. Show the fruit of your labor. Another strategy in recruiting is to encourage the team members that you have. And again, this is a strategy that focuses on the people that you already do have. Encourage them to do recruiting as well. Get them to replace themselves. We use that phrase quite a bit, and I think we stole that from somewhere. But replace yourself. We encourage people to replace themselves. We have a teacher who does that all the time. Her name's Treva. And it seems like she's always gathering another friend, recruiting them, and training them. Like just year after year. And she's volunteered in all kinds of different age groups. And she's the closest thing to one of the ultimate volunteers that we have here. And one of the things she does well is she recruits her own people. We never have to worry about Treva. If she's going to be away, she gets her own replacement. And not only that, not only in those like one-off emergency kind of situations, she just has a mindset of long-term. I'm gathering my own people. I'm training them. So she's doing a great job at that. So encourage your people to replace themselves. It takes the pressure off you, and again, it encourages that environment of teamwork, inclusiveness. We're all in this together. The pressure's not just on me, the leader. Here's another idea that we haven't actually, maybe somebody else here has done it and you could share about that, but it's an idea that we haven't actually formally done, but I like the sound of it. I would love to try it out better, but the idea is, the phrase I've used is test drive. I actually read an article just the other day, and they called a very similar idea, first serve. And the idea is that you get people to try out helping in your ministry without a long-term commitment. You just get them trying it once. Sure, come on, help in the nursery today, this one time, and that's it. They're not signing up for life. Of course, you got to, make sure your policies, any kind of plan to protect policies are covered. They can't be left alone with kids, not taking kids to the washroom, whatever safety policies you have in place at your church. Make sure you're fulfilling those. But the idea is to get people just to try it out without signing up. It's like the whole dating versus marriage concept, right? Because sometimes we invite people too quickly to marry us in our ministry. Hey, come, and I think Carolyn has actually used that. What was it, vacuumed up, I think she said. It feels like you just get vacuumed up sometimes. And yeah, I can see how that feeling is there, because once we get somebody good, we want them just to suck them up and, hey, now we're married. Try dating, right? Try to get these new people, or the people who aren't currently volunteering, get them just to date your ministry. Try it out once. So that's the idea. Another tactic, strategy, has to do with persistence. When I was in Powell River, Megan, you're going to love this story. We had a guy there in the church whose name was Warren Miller. Okay, now has anybody ever seen the Warren Miller ski films? It's not that guy. It's a different guy. But when we first went there, I met Warren Miller. I was like, wow, cool. I love your movies. That's not me. He is a retired high school principal. Great guy, very solid, friendly, etc. We loved them. They loved us. It was great. I tried to recruit him for kids ministry, and it didn't go so well. He did end up driving bus, though, for a while. But VBS, I recruited this guy for VBS, and the way I did it was I was persistent, because the first time I asked him I said, hey, would you like to come help at VBS? No, was the answer. Are you sure about that? Long story short, it was over a period of time that I just kept coming back to him, because I think that he really wanted to. He just didn't know it yet. And like I said, I'm not a strong recruiting salesperson type, but I have my moments, and this was one of my moments where I kind of shone in that. Yes, I can recruit this guy. And so what it took was persistence. And what ended up happening was he did come and help at VBS that year. And he started off kind of hesitant. Well, I'm used to working with teenagers, and this whole little kid thing is all new to me. And he was sort of reserved at the beginning of the week. But I think it was by Wednesday. I remember being inside the church building, and the game station was out in the back, in this grassy part behind the church. And I heard all this shouting, and all this yelling. I'm like, what is going on out there? I went out there, and there's Warren Miller with his group of boys. He had a crew of boys. And he was cheering them on so loudly and so enthusiastically in the game that they were playing. They were doing some sort of relay with a laundry basket or something. But he was just right there, and he was, cheering them on and just yelling. And I thought, wow, he's really. So I saw him at the end of the day. I said, so, how's it going? Oh yeah, I'm having a lot of fun, and this is just great. And by the end of the week, he came up to me and he said, you know what? Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thanks for just keeping asking, And, he wanted to sign up for the next year and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes a little persistence is required. All right. That's kind of my section on, an hour goes fast, eh? But that's kind of my section on recruiting. Key principles I want you to remember from that whole section is prayer and personal contact. Those two principles. Prayer, personal contact. Everybody now. And today's the day. You've won. Any quick questions, comments? Did anybody get anything out of that section on recruiting? Any thoughts, any ideas? No? Yes?
Confirmation, you're right about the personal contact versus the people. I get so excited whenever I get a little slip of paper on a Sunday after Sunday service, and someone's interested in volunteering, and I pursue it, and I get a meeting, but then it's like it kind of sometimes just fizzles out, and then, but yeah, we're personal contact. That's a biggie.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It makes a difference.
When you have the personal contact, be clear about it. Like I would go up to people and say, "I need volunteers, but it's only once every 6 weeks. Can you do that?" Or it's 3 times and then you're off for 3 months. Can you do that? And so that's something that they really could then actually say, "Oh, I can actually do that because I know what my commitment is."
Mm-hmm.
So just make sure it's clear.
Mm-hmm. Clarity. It's good. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, so once you've recruited all these wonderful new team members, you've prayed about it and you've used your personal contact, you've brought them into the team, you got to give them something to do. So this is what we call placing or positioning. Ideally, you have already been fairly specific in your recruiting, and both of you have some idea as to what this is going to look like. Sometimes people come to us, simply want to help, but have no idea what to do. I've encountered that. I've sat down with people and well, I just want to help, but they don't know what to do. Or sometimes I've recruited someone without a clear idea of what I want them doing. And clarity, right? We need to have a clear idea. So we have to help them find their place in the ministry. Sometimes it's clear from the beginning. Sometimes a little bit of trial and error is required. Our screening process, maybe your screening process is the same in your church, but it includes an application form. It includes a criminal record check. We check references, and we do an interview. And if we're dealing with people who want to help but don't know what to do, it's usually in the interview that we talk about that, and we figure out what they're going to do. I sit down with these people, and the first question I ask them is, tell me your life story in 5 minutes or less, because I got to go. No. But seriously, I want to know who these people are. I want to know what their motivation is for helping, and I want to know how they're best going to fit into our ministry. Get to know these people. Really hear what they're saying. For us, for me, lately, it's been about actually looking at what they've checked off on their application form. We have a whole section where we list all of these different things that they can get involved in, and people check off different things. And for a long time, I would sort of ignore that because my mind is on the gap that we have to fill. And I wasn't looking at what they were actually checking off. And if I did, it was like, well, we just want to steer them away from that anyways because we got this gap over here. So actually look at what they've checked off. Don't ignore that. And by the way, again, don't be focused on your gaps so much as focused on who the people are, right? I had a good conversation with our youth pastor here, and we were talking about the difference between youth ministry and children's ministry. He was talking about raising up small group leaders for youth ministry. Well, that's great because you can just, as the leaders arise, you just start a group. Where in our case, we have this structure set up, and we have all these classes that need teachers and helpers, and we have to fill all those gaps. We have to function. But as much as possible, I want to encourage you, and I try to encourage myself, that it's about gifts, not gaps. It's about what these people are gifted in, what God has called them to do, that will help determine their ministry. We just had a lady fairly recently come to us, and she wanted to volunteer. And I actually read her list of things that she had checked off, and she had checked off that she wanted to help in registration. She wanted to help in registration. This is DIO, right? And so I looked at that, and my first thought may have been, well, we need help in such and such class, and so we're going to plug her in there because she's a very bright, friendly, outgoing kind of person. But she had checked off she wanted to help in registration. So that's what we did. We plugged her into that. We got her trained, and she's doing that. And I think she's pretty fulfilled, and she's doing a great job. And it worked out good because it's about her gift, not her gap, or not our gap. Right? So that's really the key principle when we're talking about placing, positioning people. It's gifts, not gaps. Okay. Any thoughts on that?
Indeed.
Yeah.
I think we probably use a similar application. And so the question underneath that kind of list of possible things I could do is, what are your gifts? And I've noticed actually that is most often the one question that they don't know how to answer, which can be a really good moment to mentor somebody, talk to them about what their gifts might be or what their strengths have been in the past. But I do find it interesting that of all the questions, that is the one that is most often ranked and takes the most time in an interview because they don't...
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think some of it is that people are afraid to talk about their own strengths.
They don't want to brag.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
But then some of it also is they're not even sure what a list of gifts might look like. Maybe they don't know the expectations. Maybe I should have some...
How do you define a gift?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is actually the question.
And how would the definition of my gift fit into this anyways?
Yeah.
I'm good at such and such a thing, but how does that actually work out in terms of kids ministry?
So I often refer to the first page where they can list their hobbies, which they're good at listing. And there's often correlations between those two.
Yeah, that's good. I think what you want to get at too, and I mentioned this earlier, is their motivation, right? Because they may have a hobby or whatever, they may be good at something. That's all great, and maybe we can utilize that. But ultimately, what's their motivation? Why are they here? Why are they wanting to help? Right? Okay, training and development. Okay, so you've recruited these people, you've plugged them into a spot, and now you got to train them, and you got to develop these people. Sort of the most basic form of training is the orientation, right? You've got to give people an orientation. This is basic training that everybody should get. You need to ask yourself, what are the things that I want every team member to know? Think of the 4 or 5 W's. Who's in charge of what? Who do I go to for this problem? Who do I ask about that? Who do I call Saturday night when I'm going to be sick and I can't come in Sunday morning? Who's who? There's the what, right? What am I doing? What's expected of me? What is the curriculum? What are we doing here? There's the when. When do I show up? For how long am I doing this? Where? Where do I go? Where's the supply room? Where's this thing? Where's that thing? Maybe consider putting together a volunteer manual or a welcome package. We use a volunteer manual. It's a binder. It's got a bunch of those questions answered in there. It's a whole ton of information that we give that binder to every new volunteer. It also includes the plan to protect. Does anybody else use the plan to protect in some form or another? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay. So we give every new volunteer a full copy of that. It's in the back of the binder. This is all part of orientation, right? I've also seen a welcome package given in other churches. Kind of answers all those basic who, what, when, where questions. Once you get beyond orientation, other training beyond that starts to get much more targeted, starts to get more specific and personalized. The majority, in my mind, the majority of the most meaningful training comes on the job, when people are actually in there doing it. And it's especially good when volunteers start to train other volunteers. I mentioned our friend Treva earlier, who loves to just train her own volunteers. We also had another couple, a married couple, teaching 3-year-olds a few years ago, and they trained up a worker. She was a helper in the class at the time. They trained her, and now she's one of our star preschool Sunday school teachers. And so that was all through on-the-job. They didn't attend a seminar or a workshop. We didn't have as a staff, we didn't have a large part in that. It was volunteers training volunteers, and it was so effective. And this girl's doing wonderful. So I love it when that happens. And it's one thing to do a workshop or some type of formal training, but it's more meaningful when someone actually sees it all in action and starts to do it themselves. And in an environment where it's okay to make mistakes. We learn from mistakes. It was interesting that Carolyn said in the first session that, we want to give people a job that they can't fail in. And I understand what she's saying, that you want to give a person a task that they can succeed in. The flip side of that is, as I love to quote Craig Groeschel, who says that failure is not an option, it's a necessity. So we want to create that environment of, it's okay to fail, it's all right. If you mess that up, no big deal, it's okay, we learn, we move on, right? So there needs to be that environment in your ministry. Then there can be formal training, which is usually topical. This is where you gather people probably in a workshop type setting and do training on a particular topic or set of topics. We had a great workshop here a while back with a lady who talked about classroom management. So that was her topic, and it was an hour, hour and a half, something like that, and it was just great. It was awesome. And those who were there needed to be there. We have, I think, around 200 people on our volunteer list, including nursery. Like, it's quite a broad team. Well, we had maybe 20 people there, but those 20 people really benefited from that session. Not everybody in the whole whack of 200 is going to need to hear what she had to say, right? So this is what I mean by targeted, specific, personalized, okay? One of the best training sessions that I did, this is a few years ago now, topical training sessions that I did for volunteers, I think because I got fairly good feedback on it from them, was I simply expounded on one of our core ministry values. We have 7 ministry values. One of them is partnering with families. And so I took that one value and I talked about that. I explained some of the philosophy behind that value, why we value that, and then just some practical ideas about how to put that value into action on any ordinary Sunday. And for a lot of people, it was like, oh, that's what that means, and oh, and I can do something with that, because we had, it's nice to put values up on a page or whatever, but on a poster, but if you don't share what that means in your ministry on a practical level, it really doesn't mean a thing. So I did that workshop on that particular value, and I think it was fairly well received. So topical training, workshops, you can do that. Then you can offer things like conferences, such as the one we're at right now. Books, maybe you want to recommend certain books, purchase books for people. Children's Ministry Magazine. This is one of the greatest things that we've ever done in terms of training and developing people. So anybody else subscribe to that? It's a great magazine. What we've done with it is we've offered this as a subscription to volunteers. So if they want to get a free subscription to this, church will pay for it. They just have to sign up. So we've had about a dozen people this year sign up to get a subscription to this. We do a bulk subscription. I don't know if you know you can do that. Does anybody else do that for volunteers? Do you get this magazine for your people? It's a fairly inexpensive, if you can include it in your budget for next year or whatever, it's a fairly inexpensive way to give somebody on a regular basis something in their hands that is quick and easy to read, and there's lots of practical ideas. It's a great magazine. You guys like this magazine? Is it good? Yeah. So we've simply extended that to volunteers, and it's been a great tool in terms of training and development. Bottom line is how you train your people will be as diverse as the people themselves. You've really got to know your people. You don't have to be best friends with everybody, but you need to know enough to be able to effectively communicate with them. Whether you're sitting there texting somebody the other day, because that was that person's mode of communication. That was their communication stream. Know enough about the people that you know what's going to be effective with them. Communication is key, but people generally don't need yet another meeting. You found that too? You found that to be true? People don't need just another meeting. And we kind of went away from all of these meetings and training sessions and yada, yada, yada. You got to be in communication, but you got to be careful with the time that you're asking of people. Because if you want them to give their all when they're here doing ministry, you don't want to take away from that by having just another meeting, right? Key principle here, and I'm stealing this right out of Andy Stanley's book, 7 Practices of Effective Ministry. He says, say only what you need to say to the people who need to hear it. Say only what you need to say to the people who need to hear it. That is so true of training and development. You don't need to train everybody on everything. People need to be trained on what they're going to be doing. If they want to expand beyond what they're doing, then sure, train them on those other things. But just be careful with people's time. One of the best ways to determine how you should train people and what you should be training them on is by doing what they do. I just said a minute ago that not everybody needs to know everything, but you as the leader should probably have a pretty good idea about everything that's going on and how to do everything that happens in your ministry. I volunteered this year in a particular ministry as a volunteer outside of the church, and I was stunned at the lack of connection and communication I had with the rest of the organization. I was recruited by a leader, so I met with that guy in the beginning. I saw him once, this is in a 7-month period. I saw him once, he stopped by once to check on me, and then I saw him at the year-end wrap-up, and that was it. Not another phone call, not another email, nothing. No connection. I was given my tub of stuff, and here, you go do it. And I was just stunned at that. I thought, wow, there's something to learn there. Like, we gotta be in touch with people. We gotta check in on people. There's tremendous value in simply checking in on people. This past Sunday too, I taught the 3-year-old class. Our teacher didn't show up, so I ended up being just in this room actually, right next door here, teaching 3-year-olds. And it was a great reminder about what it is we're asking people to do. I was almost completely overwhelmed by our check-in process. And there was only 8 kids. I was like fumbling at the door and texting the name tag and the pager, and I was just like, it was scary. I thought, this is what I'm asking people to do? There's got to be a better way. So it's a great thing for you to get out there and do what people are doing. Take the YWAM approach. My brother's on staff with YWAM, and when you go on staff with YWAM, you get to the base as a staff member, you have to work every part of the base. So my brother went there to teach in the DTS, the Discipleship Training School that they have at that particular base. But the first thing he did was he washed dishes. Then he did landscaping. And then he did they do everything. So you spend about a month, I think, or 2, working the whole, depending on the size of the base, but you learn everything. Because if you're going to be a leader, you got to know what's going on. You got to be in touch with what's happening in your ministry. You have to have an actual understanding and an appreciation for the big picture. I know we're totally out of time here. I am actually almost done though. So is it okay if I just kind of finish? Maybe another 5 minutes or so? Okay. Appreciating and motivating people. We have to find ways to keep morale high while the people are with us, but also keep them motivated for the long haul. It seems to me that longevity in children's ministry is becoming more and more rare, and the definition of longevity is getting shorter and shorter. My mom taught 2-year-olds for 15 years in our church. You don't see that too often anymore. How do you get longevity with volunteers? How do you really get someone to do something for free over a really long period of time? It sounds ludicrous, doesn't it? How do you get somebody to do something for free for all those years? I think it comes down to a few things. I think it comes down to their sense of calling in their own heart. I think it's about you as the leader knowing what motivates that individual, and every individual is different. People are motivated by different things. I think it also has to do with helping these people see the big picture, not just their little part. We heard a story just recently about a group that did a Lego mosaic. They made a mosaic picture out of Lego, and different individuals or groups were working on just little 16 by 16 pieces, had no idea what they were doing. It looked like random Lego pieces put together. But then 96 of those were put together, and it made a beautiful picture of something. So you've got to give people a glimpse into what that picture looks like, rather than always just focused on their little part. We've used little morale boosters, little gifts, cards. One volunteer said, just keep giving me chocolate and I'm good to go. We've done an appreciation month in February, because that's the midpoint between September and June. And in our appreciation month, one of the things that we've tried to do is get parents and other people showing appreciation for volunteers, not just us as the staff or as the leaders. We want to encourage parents to write a card or give a small gift or something like that. I mentioned checking in with people. That goes a long way. That keeps people motivated. It keeps them feeling connected to the bigger picture. I know Carolyn talked about appreciation luncheons. We've done that as well here. You've got to pastor your people. Doesn't matter what your title is, if you have that title or not. You've got people. If you've got people that you are leading or managing, then you've got to pastor them. This has been something that I've wrestled with since I started doing ministry 7 years ago, is pastoring people. I struggle with that title, pastor. I remember when I first came to Powell River, I'm like, I'm not a pastor. I'm running this thing and I'm running this program, but no, the bottom line is if I've got people who I'm responsible for, I need to care for them. I need to pastor them. We had a lady last week supposed to be helping, not teaching, but just helping in a class. And she was responsible enough to call in and say, I got pneumonia, and I can't come in and help. And first thing I did Monday was I called her. I said, number one, don't worry about Sunday. It was all covered. It was all fine. Thanks for calling. Thanks for letting us know. But how are you doing? Can I pray for you? Right? Focus on her need. Don't worry about the ministry. It's okay. Care for people. Pastor them. That keeps them motivated. That keeps them feeling connected. Key principle there is simply help people see the big picture. Think about eternity and keep people connected. Okay, evaluating. Evaluating. The only thing I'm going to say about evaluating is the best thing that we ever did to help get us feedback about our ministry was a discussion group. Surveys, not so good, whatever, but a discussion group where we invited whoever wanted to come, volunteers, parents, anybody who is connected to our ministry. And we offered 2 different options, 2 different nights. And just come and we'll talk. There's no agenda. There's no business. It was just come share your feedback with us. And we took notes. And I tell you, we got so much out of those 2 meetings. And there wasn't masses of people that showed up. They were quite small groups actually, compared to the size of the volunteer base that we have. But get people talking. Don't rely on a survey. Surveys, just people fill out whatever they want in the survey, and it means nothing. And then you actually have to read all those things, and it's way too time-consuming, I think. Do a discussion group. That's all I'll say about evaluating it. It's a great way to get feedback. Finally, redirecting. How to fire a volunteer. Do we fire volunteers? I'll tell you, I've never personally fired a volunteer, but I have. I have asked people to take an extended break. I have asked people to try something different. I have, on only 2 occasions that I can remember, not let people even begin volunteering. I think that's only happened twice in 7 years. I have also let them go away on their own. And seriously, unless there's a serious issue, sometimes it's better just to leave it alone. And these things have a way of working themselves out sometimes. Be careful with that, because if there is a serious issue, you need to address it. But if it's somebody who's just, there's nothing wrong with what they're doing, but it's not great, just let it be. And sometimes these things have a way of going away on their own. Sometimes those people come back again, and come back again. It's like that song, the cat came back. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. That's all right. Sorry, I've gone way over time here, but just in conclusion, in summary, I want to just sort of summarize sort of the key principles that I've talked about throughout. Number 1, prayer. Right, when we talked about recruiting, we talked about prayer and personal contact. So those are the key principles there. When we talked about placing, it was about gifts, not gaps. Training and development, it was about being specific, being as diverse as the people. Keeping people motivated, it was about seeing the big picture, helping people see themselves as part of the big picture. Okay. Questions, comments before we take a break and move on to the next thing? Did anybody get anything? Any one thought? Anything that stood out to you? A practical idea or an idea that was confirmed for you? An inspirational thought?
Kids on campus. Make sure, because if you feel you put somebody in a spot where they should be, then maybe that gap will get filled by somebody that should be
right.
Where they're.
If you simply plug the gap, I think this is what you're saying.
It's not gifted.
Maybe you're taking the blessing away from somebody else who's supposed to be in that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thanks everybody. Thanks for listening. So we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we're back here. Or is it a 5-minute break now that I've gone overtime? Come back. Come back, and I'll leave it at that.